even though there was a full slate and the county was 80% black, we didn't elect a single person. I should have known that not long was biblical and not in me and your term. But here we are. Here we are, 56, 7 years later, and we are still fighting for the right to vote. Still fighting for the right to vote. Now, I sometimes when we are tempted to think that it's too much of us. And I end on this. When I think it's too much for us, I think back to 1965. One side had everything. At that time, they had all the voters, all of the elected officials, they had all of the police, they had all of the guns and gunmen, they had all the business and jobs, they had all the banks and money, they had everything. But then in spite of that, there were some people who took marching feet and praying prayer and singing song and was able to forge a great victory. So we have what we need to do what we need. But I want to say that we have to make this about saving democracy, because we are just the first ones to be sacrificed. Because if they sacrifice us, they're going to then go and sacrifice a lot of people. And I know some people say this democracy is not worth saving. I'm one of those people who think however imperfect it is critical that we save it. I have spent 50-some years of my life trying to get in it, trying to be a part of it, trying to make it better. And we have to save this democracy, because if we don't save it here, we don't save it in the rest of the world. And if we don't save it in the rest of the world, we don't save it here. I say again to you, thank you, thank you, thank you for all that you do. Mm-hmm.
Please welcome Liz Schuler and Lee Saunders from the AFL-CIO.
Labor is in the house. I'm with Lee Saunders, president of AFSCME, and we are so honored to be here today. I bring solidarity from our 57 unions, 12.5 million working people in the United States. The labor movement is here. We always have been. We always will be. Madam Vice President, it's an honor to stand by your side. I'm here again with AFSCME President Lee Saunders, my brother, and all of the union members here today. This fight, the fight for civil rights, the fight for voting rights, is a union fight. And to the event organizers, especially Hank and Rose Sanders, thank you for keeping the spotlight on Selma. In January, when the Senate blocked voting rights a few days after Dr. King's birthday, I remember feeling exasperated, heartbroken. Why is it so hard to pass something we should all agree on? But standing here at the foot of this bridge, I am reminded that our civil and labor rights heroes have overcome greater obstacles than the filibuster. John Lewis was beaten within an inch of his life, but he didn't stop. And the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act became the law of the land. Striking sanitation workers, AFSCME members, took on entrenched racism in the city of Memphis in the United States of America and won. and Dr. King gave his life in the process. All these years later, there are workers at an Amazon plant here in Alabama, most of them Black, demanding the same dignity and rights as their forefathers in Memphis. All these years later, we are still fighting for the fundamental right to vote, for our very democracy, in the face of a power structure built on keeping people of color down. But I think Dr. King's dream and his drive, he would say, finish the job. I think about John Lewis, bloodied and beaten, carrying on, moving forward, inspiring generations, and it fills me with hope. I have hope that we will pass the bill that bears his name, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, and the Freedom to Vote Act right alongside it. And let us pledge on this day, on this bridge, to never, never give up. And the heroic labor leader, Bayard Rustin, said, "We need, in every community, a group of angelic troublemakers." With the angels of Dr. King, Congressman Lewis, and so many others guiding us, let's make good trouble. Let's march, let's protest and fight and lobby and take a rest if we have to. Let's keep doing it every single day to win voting rights and worker rights and democracy for all. Thank you so much. Lee Saunders, President of AFSCME.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. Now, are you here to raise some good trouble? I want to ask that question again. Are you here to raise good trouble? Yeah. That's what all of us must do. No, 57 years ago, folks marched on this bridge, sacrificing, getting beaten up, standing up for their community, standing up for what was right back then, and it is what is right now. Voting rights, human rights, civil rights, labor rights. We are here to commemorate that day. But we are also here to do more. We are here to have a call to action, not only here in Selma, but in community by community, block by block, city by city, state by state. It is time. It's time for all of us to come together and do what we do best. A commemoration, but a call to action. A call to action for voting rights. A call to action for health care. A call to action for quality education. A call to action. It's up to us. It's our responsibility to carry this torch forward. Are you ready for that? Are you ready to carry that torch as our forefathers and foremothers did? Are you ready? Are you ready to raise some hell? Are you ready to raise some hell, hit the streets, organize, mobilize, and educate like never before? If we do that, we can win. All of us together. Let's get the job done.
All right, woo!
Please welcome President and founder of the National Action Network, Reverend Al Sharpton.
We are ready to march. Let me say, as the Vice President prepares to come, we did not come here to take selfies and go back and act like we're activists. One stroll across the bridge doesn't make you an activist. They did not march 57 years ago here to get their picture taken. They didn't complain about the program was too long and the sun was too hot. They came and laid their body down on that bridge. And because they laid their body down on that bridge, a black woman is the vice president of the United States of America. Because they laid their body down, a black woman has been nominated to the Supreme Court of the United States. A gay man is the head of transportation, guiding the infrastructure bill. They laid down on that bridge and changed America. And as you march across that bridge, we need to come down the other side and go home and organize and mobilize and change America and back these people up that are robbing us of our right to vote. We can win if we fight. Why do you think we can win, Reverend Al? Well, if you're fighting to save democracy in the Ukraine, and you should, and we pray and stand for those that want self-determination and democracy in Ukraine, but we want self-determination and democracy in Georgia. We want it in Alabama. We want the court not to reverse our ability to deal with districting and redistricting. Why? Because when we stand together, when we don't just do photo ops, but real organizing, we can win. I stood in Brunswick, Georgia, and watched a jury of 11 whites and 1 black stand up in a courtroom with Wanda Cooper Jones in the courtroom, who's here today, and Marcus, as their son Ahmaud Arbery had been killed. Whites and 1 black was not enough to convict them, but they're doing life in jail because we stood up and fought back, and we wouldn't let Wanda and Marcus stand by themselves. We can win because the brother of George Floyd is here. And we saw policemen go to jail for life for putting his neck on George Floyd's neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. We need these right-wingers that don't care. They'll stand for hours for a right-wing rally. And we want to just stand for a couple hours, take a selfie, and go home. No, this is about a movement. This is why Dr. King and John Lewis and Medgar Evers paid the price. And I come to tell you, 3 years ago, John Lewis made his last trip on this bridge alive. But John Lewis is gone, but his brothers and we're still here. Dr. King led the march from Selma to Montgomery. Dr. King is gone, but his children, Martin Luther King III and Reverend Bernice, they're here, and his daughter-in-law, Andrea. We are still here. We're the next wave of a movement whose time has come. And I heard someone say about General Edmund Pettus, we ought to first start by taking that name down and naming this bridge the John Lewis Bridge. Time out for a Klansman to have a bridge. But the symbol of that bridge is to change America. The symbol of that bridge is for us to restore and protect our right to vote. So as we march today, we're not going for a walk, we're going for a journey. We're going to turn this country around. You think it is a battle in Ukraine, it's going to be a battle all over the world to save democracy. No backing up, no getting tired, no selling out, no getting weary, no turning on each other. It's stand up and fight back time, protect our right to vote. Thank you, and God bless you.
Please welcome President and CEO of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, Dr. Charles Steele.
Thank you so much. I'm not going to be that long. My colleagues in the civil rights movement has pretty much done a great job. But I cannot be remiss by letting you know and letting you understand that the fight has just begun. What you must realize, in my being President CEO of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference for almost 16 years, I've learned a lot. I thought I knew something, but in this position, I brought on a lot of enemies that said, we don't want SCLC to exist. We don't want the civil rights movement to exist. And the fact being is that we as a people, African Americans and all civil rights organizations, we have a great responsibility because the whole world is dependent upon us. See, I've been to Moscow, Russia. I met with former President Mikhail Gorbachev, who knocked down the Berlin Wall. I've been to Ukraine, killed Ukraine. I built relationships all over the world. And everywhere I go, they tell me, still don't stop the movement, because if you stop, we stop, and we will continue to be oppressed. I tell you here today, African Americans and fair-minded thinking of all background and ethnicity, our time has come. Many times you have to give up the supreme sacrifice, your life. You have to give it up. You cannot be a scared person and fool around with this movement. You cannot be made out of any type of fearness where folks will tell you that they will destroy you and kill you. You have to be willing to die for freedom. Freedom ain't free. You have to pay for it. And all about economics. 2% of all of the money in the last 2 years that was given in loans, financial loans, to people in this country, only 2% was African Americans, people of color. Something is wrong with that. We are in economic slavery. But let me go a little further, something that folks don't like to talk about. Racism is a virus. Racism will kill you like COVID-19. It was discovered by the CDC last April in the medical research that if we don't get healing in this country, that racism is passed from one generation to another. Ladies and gentlemen, we must be healed in America. America has never been healed from slavery. America has never been healed from the racist embeddedness in terms of the way they treat African Americans. They treat us subhumanly. I'm not afraid to say it. I'm willing to die for it. Are you? Are you willing to die for your freedom? And then when black folks get in office, you can't forget where you come from. You got to stand up and bring the rest of us back. Politics has never freed the oppressed. The oppressed must free politics. God bless you, and I love you.
Please welcome Congresswoman Terry Sowell.
Stony the road they trodden, bitter the chastening rod, felt in days when hope unborn had died, and yet with a steady beat, have not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers died. Yes, stony was the road our ancestors trod, but what courage and faith they must have had to get to this place on this day, 57 years ago. I am Congresswoman Terry Sewell, and I want to welcome you to my hometown of Selma, Alabama. And to the state of Alabama, the state of historic sites and good eats and college football champions and Southern hospitality. Indeed, it's a glorious day to welcome my former colleague and friend, our Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris. She also brought 5 cabinet members with her today, and you will hear from each. I also want to take a point of personal privilege and acknowledge that I want to acknowledge all of my colleagues from Congress that are here today. Today is a time of reflection, rededication, and renewal. We gather together today to reflect on that monumental moment in history when foot soldiers and freedom fighters from every corner of this great nation came to Selma and declared that the ideals of justice and equality for all were not mere words. It was at this moment, 57 years ago, that America was reminded that justice and equality were moral absolutes. And can't you hear John Lewis say, good trouble? Good trouble. Though every commemoration is special, this year it feels undeniably different without our beloved colleague, friend, mentor, and my friend, Congressman John Lewis. And yet we must find comfort in knowing that his spirit and great works live on in us, and his legacy will endure through generations. The seed that was sowed 57 years ago gave rise to the election of President Barack Obama and Vice President Kamala Harris and the nomination of Ketanji Brown Jackson. It was because Rosa sat that we can now stand up and speak out for justice. It was because of John Lewis and the freedom fighters dared to march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge that I, as a little girl growing up in Selma, Alabama, could one day dream of representing this great city in Congress. Today, as we assemble on this hollow ground, let us reflect on the past, but realize that we must rededicate ourselves to the future. Bloody Sunday was indeed a turning point in the fabric of American history. Yet we know that progress is elusive. Old battles have become new again as state legislatures across this nation are passing more restrictive voter laws. We simply cannot sit back and let it happen. Recently, we felt a big defeat when the bill that I authored, the John Robert Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, did not pass the Senate. We must not give up, because we understand that the price of freedom is not free and that it was bought and paid for by the blood and tears of others. We must not give up hope or faith in our conviction. We may face roadblocks in our quest for voter empowerment, but it is not the end of the road. Our foremothers and forefathers taught us that. Let us be renewed by the courage and unwavering faith of foot soldiers that marched 57 years ago. Truly, the road that our ancestors trotted was stony. But today, as we march hand in hand, let us truly sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Let us sing a song full of hope that the present has brought us. And as we face the rising sun of our new day begun, let us truly commit to marching on until victory is won.
Please welcome Deputy Secretary of Veterans Affairs, Donald Remy.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am truly humbled to be here with all of you and privileged to share this time with you, with veterans and descendants of the Selma to Montgomery marches. I thank you. Our nation thanks you for your courage and your fortitude. To be here with Vice President Harris and fellow members of her cabinet is an honor I will never forget. Because this is hallowed ground, one of the many battlefields in our country's long fight for freedom. The fight that continues to this day. As a black veteran, I want to reflect upon one of the many folks who helped lead the march here 57 years ago, another black veteran, Reverend Hosea Williams. John Lewis once said that Reverend Williams was one of the founding fathers of the new America, who helped liberate us all. Think about that. Founding fathers of the new America. Well, before he was our founding father, he was a staff sergeant, a veteran of the bloody battles of World War II. Grievously wounded, Williams was a Purple Heart recipient, a man who gave so much for this country, so much for all of us, a hero. But you know what? When he came home, he wasn't welcomed as a hero. Even in uniform, Staff Sergeant Williams faced racism, Jim Crow, brutality. And when he marched across this bridge, shoulder to shoulder with John Lewis, he was beaten bloody for exercising the very freedoms he spilled blood to defend in war. Beaten for marching for justice, beaten for marching for equality, for the right to vote, beaten because he was a black man. Righting those wrongs and others is what the march was about. It's why we're still here today, building a better future with Vice President Harris and the Biden-Harris administration leading the way. But words aren't enough. Reminding people it's not enough. Action and outcomes are the only things that will ever be enough. So at VA, I want to tell you, we're taking action. We're addressing racial inequities affecting black veterans we serve. We're working to make sure all veterans have equitable access to VA benefits and services. We're embracing equity into everything we do to reduce, to eliminate disparities in our system. From mental to maternal to cardio care, we're finding and we're closing gaps for black veterans wherever they might exist. We're researching disparities on PTSD ratings among black veterans. We're removing factors causing disparity in kidney disease diagnoses among black veterans, placing maternity care coordinators at every facility to reduce maternal deaths, which are all too common among black women veterans. We're working with our HBCU community to improve outcomes by creating a workforce that looks like America and the veterans we serve. All veterans, no matter the color, deserve the same high-quality care. We're also working to assure veteran access to that most sacred right, the right that they fought for, the right that some died for, the right to vote. When President Biden calls this our mission, he says this is the foundation of American democracy. So at VA, we're doubling down. We're doubling down on the voting support we already provide, expanding access where we can, and looking to do even more everywhere we can. Already, we're providing voting assistance for tens of thousands of inpatients and residents at our hospitals, at our nursing homes, at our treatment centers. Already, we're helping homebound veterans and their caregivers vote. And I'm excited to announce right here, right now, VA's putting voting access right at the veterans' fingertips by linking vote.gov on the VA website's veterans visit every single day. They go there to get their health care. They go there to get their benefit information, their medical information, and much more, and now they can go there for voting information. In short, we're fulfilling this president's executive order on promoting access to voting. To include, we're exploring VA's potential for designation under the National Voter Registration Act. Now, I've got a lot more I could say about what the VA is doing, but for me, it all boils down to this. For too long, too many Americans have fought too hard around the globe to protect our rights and freedoms, only to come home and have to fight brutal battles for their own rights and freedoms. Americans like Hosea Williams. Well, those fights at VA are over. Those fights in this administration are over. We're going to get black veterans the care, the benefits, the services they deserve, like all veterans. We're going to help guarantee all our veterans have a right to vote. We're going to keep this country's fundamental promises that have been broken for far too long. We're going to serve them every bit as well as they have served us, and keep earning black veterans' trust as we do it. We're going to keep marching together until we're standing tall, until our feet are firmly planted on the other side of that bridge. God bless you all. God bless our veterans. God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Please welcome the Administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, Michael Regan.
Good afternoon. It is such an honor to stand here today on this most sacred ground, a ground infinitely stained by the blood, sweat, and tears of our brothers and sisters who marched towards justice 57 years ago. Men and women like John Lewis, Hosea Williams, Amelia Boynton, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Diane Nash, Ralph Abernathy, and a little girl named Cheyenne Webb, who after being beaten with billy clubs, bombarded with tear gas, found within herself a mighty strength that carried her across this very bridge. We gather here today to heap praise on the legions of giants who suffered unspeakable violence, who faced indignity after indignity, and who, sustained by the faith and the hope and the love in their hearts, changed the shape of America forever and for everyone. It's an overwhelming feeling to be here today, seeing as my own destiny is intimately wrapped up in the heroism of the men and women who marched across this bridge. Not centuries ago, but just a generation ago, I can't help but think about my father, Zeb Regan. His books laid out before him, studying by candlelight. He had no choice but to rely on that burning flame, because there was no electricity in the house he grew up in, because the white landowners surrounding our property would not allow that electricity to be run. This is just one example of many of how we were suppressed. Yet when my father was called upon to serve, there wasn't an ounce of hesitancy. As a young black man, he dutifully served his country in Vietnam, served a country that he loved. It's with that same love that was propelled by the heroes of the civil rights movement that gave them the courage to fight for equality and ultimately secure the voting rights. Selma has taught us a lot. That passion propelled young civil rights leaders on their journey to justice, a journey that has not been complete, but it's our responsibility to carry it forward. I visited the Freedom House in Lowndes County yesterday, Bloody Lowndes as it's called, because when organizers and protesters attempted to get blacks voting, they were beaten, battered, and evicted from their homes. This is the history of black communities across this country. This is the history that our children must know. Today, Lowndes County still endures untold inequities, from continued efforts to disenfranchise residents, skyrocketed cases of COVID-19, and failing wastewater systems that spew environmental toxins into people's yards and back into their homes, creating conditions ripe for the resurgence of the hookworm that will only get worse with climate change. I spent time in Loudoun County yesterday so that I could see firsthand the injustices that folks have been living with for decades. Pipes protruding from the side of their homes, spilling waste into the same places in their yards that their children are playing. I met two beautiful little children who've become conditioned to accept that that's the way it's supposed to be. But it's not the way it's supposed to be for the children of Loudoun County, and it's not supposed to be the way for anybody in this country. The good people of Loudoun County taught us that the fight for civil rights is inseparable from the fight for environmental justice, for health justice, for racial justice, for economic justice. We cannot be for one without the other. And that's why I am personally committed to working closely with governors and local leaders across this country to ensure that the historic infusion of the bipartisan infrastructure law goes towards climate-resilient infrastructure in communities that need it the most, to ensure that the solutions are not developed from the top down, but the bottom up. So let me be clear. Everything we do, everything I do at the United States Environmental Protection Agency will be rooted in the realities and the demands and the aspirations of communities who've suffered at the hands of indifference, neglect, and inaction. Communities like Loudoun County, Alabama, Mossville, Louisiana, Detroit, Michigan, the South Side of Chicago, and so many other communities. Our legacy must be that we did not just deal with the issues up to the fence line, but we saw the people on the other side of the fence. We looked them in the eyes. We listened to what they had to say. We learned from them, and we made their lives fundamentally better. If there was ever a moment when we could break the pattern of injustice that has long plagued this country, I believe that moment is now. So let us honor the legacy of civil rights heroes on whose shoulders we stand by seizing this moment. Thank you.
Please welcome the Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona.
Thank you. When a virtual event marked a historic march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge last year, Vice President Harris urged us to keep on in the tradition of Selma. Today, thanks to the administration's efforts to fight the pandemic, we're blessed to gather safely in person, and Vice President's charge is as powerful as ever. I've reflected on what it means to keep on in the tradition of Selma. As a teacher, it means remembering that before 1965 crossing of this bridge, 100 black teachers engaged in their own march, seeking the right to vote. They inspired thousands to raise their voices and take action that made the Voting Rights Act possible. Teachers are often at the heart of efforts to change our world. To honor the tradition of Selma also requires that we see, for all our progress as a nation, we still have work to do to achieve equity and justice. America's high school graduation rate is at an all-time high, but students of color graduate at rates 10 percentage points below their peers. The wealthiest students complete college at a rate of 5 times higher than students from low-income backgrounds. This remains a civil rights and social justice issue. 11 years before the march on this bridge, the Supreme Court struck down separate but equal public schools in Brown versus Board of Education. Today, we're still on the path to achieving the promise of the Brown decision, the promise of equity. We haven't yet reached that mountaintop. Students of color have less access to a well-rounded education. Amid the pandemic, students in schools serving a majority of black students are many more months behind in their learning than the students of schools serving mostly white students. And over the last 2 decades, the gap in bachelor's degree attainment between white and black students has actually grown. To achieve the promise of equity, to keep on in the tradition of Selma, to honor those who marched, some of whom gave their lives for the cause of justice, we need to do a few important things. We must engage with communities of color, especially parents, families, and young people. Your voices must influence our actions in DC. We must boldly and unapologetically address gaps in opportunity. Let's continue to protect the right to vote. Let's provide universal preschool. Yes, let's, as the president charged, cut the cost of childcare. And let's grow and support a diverse educator workforce. Kids benefit from learning from a diverse education workforce. It's hard to be what you can't see. But too many schools are more segregated today than they were decades ago. We must improve that. The president called on Congress to increase the Pell Grant by more than $2,000. Let's get that done. It's not enough to lock arms today and return to complacency tomorrow. Let's make sure our HBCUs get the support they need to educate the next generation of leaders, like our wonderful Vice President, Kamala Harris. The work is hard, but generations who cross this bridge know that nothing worthwhile is achieved without hard work, without sacrifice, without a deep belief in righteous cause. I'm humbled to be here and proud of the department as a partner. When we work together, when we keep on in the tradition of Selma, we can secure the promise of opportunity, equity, justice for a new century and for each of our children. And as the great Congressman Lewis said, there's still work left to be done. Get out there and push and pull until we redeem the soul of America. Thank you. Thank you.
Please welcome the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg.
Good afternoon. What an honor to be with you, to be with my cabinet colleagues, and to be with the Vice President. It's impossible to stand here and not think of what it was like here 2 years ago. My first time in Selma and my last time in the presence of Congressman John Lewis. I can never forget his voice that day, even as late into his illness as he was, how that voice thundered across this place, telling us how he thought he would die on this bridge, urging us to carry on that struggle he so heroically served. He and the other marchers hallowed this place, and their example calls us to examine how we are making ourselves useful to the cause of racial justice and equal rights. Now, some are asking what transportation could possibly have to do with racial justice. Some have been asking that very pointedly. So it's all the more fitting that we're here at this bridge, this piece of infrastructure that became a battleground in the struggle for equal rights. This place that reminds us how transportation and civil rights have always been related. From the ships that carried so many into bondage, to the ferries and wagons of the Underground Railroad that transported so many to freedom, from the train car at issue in Plessy versus Ferguson, to the bus where Rosa Parks decided to keep her seat. We are reminded again and again how deep is that relationship between the physical movement of human beings and the social movement that changed this country. And so it falls to all of us who work in transportation to carry that movement forward. Whenever a highway was built right through a black neighborhood that lacked the wealth or the power to demand that that road take a different course, it falls to us to do something about it. Wherever a generation of jobs working on infrastructure right in a community of color excluded those workers and businesses actually rooted in those communities, it falls to us to do something about it. Wherever the ranks of those who work in transportation, from airline pilots to cement finishers to officials in my department, wherever they do not reflect the diversity of this country, it falls to us to do something about it. And I'm proud to say we are doing something about it, especially now that our president and vice president are leading this investment in America's transportation infrastructure. We won't let this time be like the past. This time we are seeing to it that no one will be left behind. No one will be left behind when we're looking at who will be served by the construction of a bridge or by who might be displaced by the expansion of a road. As hundreds of billions of dollars are being invested in our transportation future, we are partnering on local and economic hiring to create access to jobs that build generational wealth. We're working with HBCUs to make sure a range of careers in this field, including the makeup of my department, capture the aspirations of a new generation of black professionals. We're working with cities and states to see to it that black pedestrians who are more likely to lose their lives on our roadways see the benefits of safer streets. That black commuters who are more likely to count on public transit see the benefits of new buses and improved subways. That black children who are more likely to become ill from breathing polluted air see the benefits of cleaner air from the transportation technology of the future. That is our responsibility, and that is what we are doing today in this administration. We will ensure that no one is left behind, and in this time,